This is a really exciting program for us, and I want to do more stuff like this. I'm John Foster. I'm a reference librarian here at Mentor Public Library. We're very pleased to have Michael Williams here with us this evening from Great Lakes Brewing to talk about some of the styles and selections they have out for currently. And I will say that this is something very close to my heart. I'm really bummed out that I'm actually running this program and not attending this program. Because as I was mentioning to Michael a little earlier, I had the good fortune to live in Portland, Oregon in the late 1980s and 90s, which was a big sort of takeoff point for the sort of microbrewing wave that happened around that time. And then I had the good fortune to move to Cleveland eventually, which has a number of really good local places. Yeah, I think I'd like to thank everybody for signing up for this tonight. And I think without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter and let's get going.
Sounds good. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Always love hopping on with local community partners and doing programs, stuff like that. Spreading the good GLBC love around. So, Mike Williams from Great Lakes Brewing Company. I am our lead of all of our educational efforts at the brewery. So I do everything from new staff trainings. We're an employee-owned company, so definitely really important for everyone on staff, no matter where you work, everyone from the bottling line all the way up to the CEO. I've had them all for training. It's really important for us to know our history, what our beers are all about, what they taste like, the brewing process and all that stuff. And I share that knowledge with our business partners, like our wholesalers, our retailers. Shout out to the Mentor Heinens. Thanks for having those singles available so that our participants could pick up their little, mixed 4-pack type thing to taste along today, because, that's part of the theme of what we're doing here. So yeah, it's great. And I do some other marketing stuff. If you sign up for our Much Brew newsletter, you're reading my writing. If you read a blog, that's me. So I funnel those educational efforts through some marketing stuff too, but my passion is education. So I'm really pumped to be with all of you here tonight to hopefully pop a couple cans. I have the luxury of a draft pour because the offices are right above the brew pub that John was talking about. So I went up to the upstairs bar, said, I got a tasting, pass me a Tropicostal. And now here I am up at my desk. So, all right. So I got some good visuals for it. John, can you give me host access or screen share access?
Yes, I can.
There's some razzle dazzle visuals for everybody. So basically, this is going to be kind of a general approach today, right? We're going to look at 4 of our different beers. I'll share a little bit of the background of the style, what they're supposed to taste like, generally speaking, and then we'll pick apart a little bit about what our particular version of Great Lakes is doing. So it's a really broad look at the different beers we're producing right now. So it will be an exciting one. Let me get rolling. So I'm always curious about the group too. Again, if you guys want to throw some stuff in the chat, I'm always kind of curious, favorite beers. You get bonus points if it's one of ours. This is, by the way, this is a little like a look into our Hop College program. We run some programs from here out of the breweries. So I'll mention we got one coming up next week. I'll mention that towards the end. But so you got a favorite beer, throw it in the chat. I'm always curious where people are coming from. I obviously love our beer a ton, but I love the whole world of beer too. Certified Cicerone, which is kind of the beer equivalent of sommelier. So I know all the other brands out there too, and there's a lot of other delicious stuff. And yeah, that's the main question. If we were in person, we could kind of talk about what your beer background is and stuff like that. Feel free to share that too if you would like. Cool. But otherwise, I'm just going to start rolling because I got a lot of stuff I want to share with you guys. And of course, always respectful of time, right? So if you have anything you want to share, throw it in the chat and I'll shout it out when you guys throw it in there. So this is what we're going to kind of look at today. Like I was mentioning, kind of a broad look at 4 different, we'll look through the lens of 4 different Great Lakes beers that are kind of big for us right now. Kind of look at, again, backgrounds, history of these different styles, coming from all over the world in different time periods. And we'll look at a certain set of guidelines for kind of a shared language for what these beers supposed to taste like, kind of see how our versions fit in there. Maybe they're an innovative take on whatever the style may be. Good answer from Amy and Chris, the good old Christmas ale. And we will be talking about Christmas ale to conclude this discussion, because whenever we get to Christmas ale, that's when the floodgates open and all the questions, all the big questions come out. So we'll save that one for the end. Got a big fan of Burning River and John. Excellent. Classic old school American pale ale. One that I love drinking here at the pub. That's a great pub beer for me.
Yeah, it's great off the tap. I love it.
Yep. Cool. So if we're going to be tasting beer, I wanted to share just a couple words with everybody about how to taste beer in a maybe a little bit more of an intentional way, right? You know, just drinking beer, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, with just enjoying a pint or two with friends and all that. But there's also, especially in craft beer, there's so much wonderful flavor nuance, and we can dig a little deeper to perceive some of those flavors by using certain techniques. I dig into that. So one more chat. You got love a pumpkin beer from Cheryl. So I do too. I love a good, like, balanced, you know, pumpkin spice beer. We do a really fun one that's only out here out of the pub, where we use fresh roasted pumpkins from, we have a plot of farmland right around the corner here in the neighborhood. And we grow pumpkins there, grow some pumpkins at our plot of land down a hill farm too, and then roast those and use those in a pumpkin ale. It's a little bit more mild and balanced than some of the other ones out there. So I really love when that one's on tap. And then it goes away in like 3 days because everybody else loves it too. Okay, so for some good tasting, and if you all at home went out to Menor Heinen's and grabbed your little mixed pack and stuff, this would be a great time to open one of those beers. And if you want to follow along, we're starting with Dortmunder. We're going to go in the same order that was pictured up here. Start with Dortmunder, go through Crushworthy, Tropicoastal, and then the Christmas ale. So, and I have my pint. We always recommend pouring really any beer into a glass, specifically a beer clean glass. You guys may be able to see right now. Look at that beautiful lacing that's starting to form on the side of my glass. That indicates that the glass is beer clean. So you can have a regular, even a clean plate or something like that, but there still could be a little residual oil and stuff like that. We can't have anything like that going on a beer glass. That's going to create, this is beer clean, so you won't see it here, but if you ever have a beer glass and there's a bunch of bubbles sticking to the side, that's a big no-no. That's a sign that the glass is not beer clean. And what's happening is carbonation is getting sucked out of solution, and you're not going to have the foam cap that is proper to a good pint of beer. And there's a reason why that foam cap is so important. It actually helps channel aromatics from the beer into our nose. It's kind of like a pathway to help those aromatics get into our nose. So beer clean glass is something that's really important. This really, when it comes to conditions for tasting, that's the most important thing. Some other obvious stuff you don't want to be around: competing smells. I'm in our offices right now, so it's very aroma neutral, which is great. We want to avoid things like eating food, drinking coffee, smoking, anything like that within a couple hours of tasting, as well as naturally any residual flavors from that can affect what we're tasting. Now, just a couple little techniques that I like to employ when I'm trying to get to know a certain beer a little bit better, or when I'm sitting on our sensory panel here at the brewery. I have the heavy burden of sitting on our taste panels here at Great Lakes. But I take one for the team, for everybody out there, to make sure the beer is tasting good. So this is the kind of stuff we do. Aroma is 90% of our perception of flavor. So we got to really engage what's going on with the nose. So I do something like a little dog sniff. And if you're at home and you got your beer in the glass and everything like that, I encourage you. I can't see you, which is totally cool, but I encourage you to follow along and do this, right? So a couple quick short sniffs just like that. Just like if you're taking Doggo for a walk and he sees something interesting on the ground, he's going to kind of go, those quick short sniffs. A couple of those are going to really drive the aromatics to the back of the nasal passageway. And it's really where the nasal passageway reaches the roof of your mouth that we have our best receptors for engaging aroma. I call them the retronasal receptors. And then aroma deep in there is really important. Now, of course, we taste, and we go not only taste the beer, but we also consume when we're doing a beer tasting. Unlike I hear, rumor is, some other kinds of tastings where you may spit the liquid out. We do not do that in beer for a very good reason, because the good old tongue map that we learned when we were young, although it's not 100% accurate, we can taste all of the taste all throughout our mouth. We have taste buds on the sides of our mouth, roof of our mouth, everywhere. But the bitterness receptors are concentrated towards the back of the palate. So you have to actually consume the beer to best engage those bitterness receptors. Every beer is going to have some component of bitterness to it. So let me demonstrate. Because we have taste buds all throughout our mouth, we want to engage as many of them as possible. So I'll demonstrate the mouthwash technique to get that done. Looks a little goofy, right? That's what we do to taste the beer as best as we can. So that swish around the mouth is going to engage as many taste buds as possible. We're going to get a better sense of the bitterness, sweetness, if it's a sour beer, the sourness, and so on that's present in the beer. You may have noticed I did one other thing. I breathed back out through my nose. When we do that, we're re-engaging those retronasal receptors one more time. And human saliva will actually help unlock some more flavor compounds that's present in the beer. So some stuff that we may not have smelled when the beer was still outside our mouth, we're now able to perceive better because of chemical reactions that are going on inside the mouth. So if you're hanging out with friends at the bar and you want to do all that, pinky up, go for it. This is the kind of stuff we do when we're being very intentional about tasting. Of course, if you're having a beer tasting with friends, totally go for it and get to know your beers, right? We brewers, we put a lot of hard work and craft into making these delicious beverages for you. So it's always appreciated when you really get to know the flavor of what's going on. Generally, what we're going to look at today really is just, we'll kind of look at, is this beer kind of true to style or something like that a little bit. But overall, for us as brewers, as commercial brewers, right, we are running a business, of course. The main thing that we're concerned with is making beer that tastes good, that you all out there like and enjoy.
One of our participants had a question, and
go for it.
It's actually like something I'm interested in too. So does when I used to work in a microbrew tavern, one of the things we were all about there, or one of the things we were told to do, was frost the glasses. Does that alter the taste or other aspects of the experience? Yeah.
So what we say is chilled glassware is not a huge deal. Chilled glassware, especially if it's a hot day and you have like a very light beer that's supposed to be extremely refreshing, go for it. But the colder the temperature of the liquid is, the harder it's going to be to taste the liquid. Your taste buds start getting a little numbed and all that. Aromatics don't jump off quite as well when the beer is colder. So we definitely don't recommend frozen glassware. That's going to get the beer really cold. You're not really going to be able to taste it that much. And then the other thing about specifically frozen glassware is a lot of times what will happen is somebody will wash the glasses and there's still a residual sanitizer on the glass, but they'll put those glasses right into the freezer. So what does that mean? That sanitizer is still in your glass and then a beer goes right in there. So that means you could be drinking very small amounts of residual sanitizer, which basically will just give you a headache or something like that. So chilled glassware, hot day, refreshing beer, go for it. But typically, especially when we're being intentional about tasting, we recommend a room temperature glass. But in the end, people like what they like. You know what I mean? Like, if a bar works for a bar to use the chilled glassware, then good. Just a fun tool. You can Google this. It's called the Beer Flavor Map. It's a very useful tool for if you want to kind of develop a deeper vocabulary about what you're perceiving. We all taste stuff differently. So, you know, I'm very big with when we're doing tastings in person and stuff, and we're having a lot of discussion, you know, gut reaction, what do you taste? There's no wrong answers. That being said, we can all kind of train our palates to better, to make it kind of quasi-philosophical. I was a philosophy major in college. That's why I work in beer now. There's a certain chemical composition out here, right? And we can come to a better shared like language about what that chemical composition tastes like. No, none of us are going to taste exactly the same as somebody else, but we can kind of get closer, right, to a shared language. So beer flavor map is great for developing your sensory vocab. If you do a quick Google image search, you'll find a PDF. You're good to go. Lastly, when we talk about the different beer styles, I'm going to refer to the Beer Judge Certification Program guidelines. This is the organization that writes guidelines for homebrew competitions. So again, the judges can have criteria for awarding top examples and all that. And I like using this set of guidelines because they're pretty static. So it's really easy to talk about beer styles using their language because it doesn't change like every 6 months or something like that. They have a fun app if you're out and about and just want to learn about beer wherever you are. I encourage you to download the BJCP app, and you can pull up different beer styles and learn about the pint that you're sipping on right there in front of you. All right, let's get tasting. So if you haven't cracked a Dortmunder and you got it at home, go ahead and do it. Basics for talking about beer, right? What are those big numbers? I want to start off with the beer that we're tasting, then we'll kind of come back after the background, look at, okay, how does this make sense as the style it's trying to be? ABV, of course, alcohol by volume, how much party's in the cup, if you will, and so on. IBU stands for International Bitterness Unit. It's a term that people have become more and more familiar with. We love to talk about IBUs in the United States, and it's basically a scientific measurement of how bitter a beer is, depending on how much bittering compound is in there. And it's a scale that goes roughly 1 to 100. Can go higher. It's tough for us to tell the difference past 100. So for Dortmunder, 5.8% ABV, a little bit on the high end for a lager. A lot of lagers out there tend to be 4.5%. IBUs at 30 on the grand scale of things, that's relatively low. Once we get to the IPAs and stuff, we'll see the IBUs start to go a little bit higher. And then we like to highlight the malts and hops that are used in our beers. So it's not a brew process class, so we can't go super in depth, but basically all of our beers and pretty much any brewed beer is going to use something called a base malt. That's where we get most of our sugars for fermentation. So we get alcohol and CO2 from our little buddies, the yeast. This caramel 60, you'll see basically other malts listed next to the base malt. That's what we call a specialty malt that's going to add color, flavor, and aroma to the beer. So caramel 60 adds that gold color Dortmunder. It adds a bit of a perhaps bready sweetness to the beer, fresh baked bread right out of the oven. I think of that a lot when I'm drinking Dortmunder. Then for hops are primarily used for bitterness, as indicated by IBUs, but there are also flavors and aromas that come from hops. But in a beer like Dortmund, we're really focusing more, there's some hop character, but we're focusing, in my opinion, maybe a little bit more on the malt. I don't know, it ends up being right down the middle. For us as American beer drinkers, where we're so focused on IPAs, in the grand scheme of things, Dortmunder is pretty restrained when it comes to hops. As a lager, Dortmunder is perfectly balanced in the context of craft beer. It's not a hoppy beer, right?
Yeah, it seems to have been there's like a sort of arms race in terms of hops in the last 10 years. And it's nice to drink a beer where they're not like, you guys aren't like flexing your hop, whatever.
Right,
like.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, especially in the first decade of this millennium, 2000s up to 2010 was the IBU. Literally, it's often nicknamed the IBU arms race because people are trying to make 150, 170 IBU beers and higher. Balance has been something that's always been really key for us at Great Lakes.
Sure.
I saw Claudia had another question. The consume by date on the packaging, that is a great question. So does it go bad or does it just not taste as good? It doesn't go bad in any sense of, it's not like milk or food products or things like that where it would harm you. But we use an enjoy by date in our packaging. Do I have a can up here? Oh, they're out of reach. But on the can, it's on the bottom of the can printed, and then it's on the bottom left or right hand side of the bottle. One of those two sides. I think it's the bottom left hand side of the bottle is printed an enjoy by date. Basically, after that date, the beer is no longer going to taste how we intended it to. It's a slow process that happens day by day, but we have to give some sort of definitive end date for after that date. That beer is almost certainly not going to taste like it did when it was fresh. And basically, the reason that happens is oxygen, which breaks everything down. It creates rust, all that kind of stuff. Oxygen is going to basically totally eat away at hop character first. So all the fresh aromas and flavors get from hops fade. Malt kind of gets this weird muddled character. It kind of tastes like sherry-like or honey or whatever when it's not supposed to. And then an extreme end reaction. If you had a super old beer, it kind of almost tastes a little papery or cardboard. So yeah, after that date, we recommend, well, hopefully don't buy it, keep an eye out when you're in a store. And if it says stored, let us know so we can pick it up. And then if it happens to go out of code at home, you can cook with it. It's a great way that's what I use for the few beers that go out of code at home. And beer is always best enjoyed fresh. So fresher the better. Okay, we only have so much time, so I don't want to go too intense into history. I have a lot of the content up here, but I'm going to paint in broad strokes for the history because I really want to focus just more on the liquid, all right? I believe we're going to do, in a little bit later, we're going to do a little bit more of a straight up historical program. So just broad strokes. Generally speaking, what's a Dortmunder? Dortmunders originated down in Dortmund, Germany, in northwest Germany. It's very close to some other famous brewing cities like Düsseldorf and Köln, which are famous for the alt beer and the Kolsch. Dortmund was this giant brewing hub in the 19th century. Was really one of the leading beer producing cities in all of Europe. They started brewing a pale lager in Dortmund, in large part thanks to influence from the Pilsner, which was coming from the Czech Republic. This very pleasant looking guy right here is Josef Groll, who invented the Pilsner in the Czech Republic in 1842, thanks to a lot of different technological advances. And Pilsner pretty much immediately started marching across the continent and started becoming the dominant beer style in a lot of other cities. But the people in Dortmund were very protective of their own home industry. They wanted to make sure that beer that was being consumed there was still being brewed in Dortmund and all that. So they kind of had to adapt to these later lager beers that were being produced. They wanted to do it in their own way. And part of the reason, or part of what shaped Dortmund lagers to look the way they do is the people who live in Dortmund. The city was very industrialized, full of steel mills, coal mines, and stuff like that. So you had gruff dudes working long hours in really hard conditions. And so they needed a beer. They wanted a refreshing beer like the Pilsner, but they wanted it to be a little bit stronger than a typical Pilsner. Ergo, part of the reason why Dortmunder Gold has a higher alcoholic content compared to your typical lager. I have a note on the water too. So there's something about the water that helps direct. There we go. It's a little bit later. I'll get to the water in one sec, but that's also going to drive the way that a Dortmunder lager is going to taste for when it comes to the hop profile. So the reason why there's a little bit more, so I mentioned a Dortmunder classically ends up being perfectly balanced, not too malty, not too hoppy. We get a lot of that malt character. We have to add more malt for the higher ABV. And then later when we get to the water, that'll explain why there's a little bit more of a hop profile too. So many of the large brewers kind of, consolidate in Dortmund like they do in a lot of other areas. They develop a really robust brewing industry in the city, but then there's a lot of consolidation. So we have two main competitors, those being Dortmunder Union Brewery, which was founded by this Fritz Brinkhoff character with the excellent mustache, and then the Dortmunder Actian Brewery. And those two kind of duke it out and compete against each other in the slightly more contemporary context for Dortmunder lagers. World War II, of course, has a big effect on the brewing industry in the city. There's a lot of damage done to the city of Dortmund, and so some of these other major brewers that exist there kind of have to fold, and we're left with the two big competitors of Dortmunder Union and Dortmunder Actian Brewery. And then they essentially all consolidate, and there's just one large brewer that's making beer in Dortmund. And actually kind of lighten up the beer a little bit. A Dortmunder that you find in the actual town of Dortmund, Germany, might not actually taste a ton like our Dortmunder Gold Lager, because ours, we think, is a little bit more true to what a Dortmunder would have been like more in the original 1800s heydays of the style, as opposed to the more, as other lagers got lighter and lighter, the major brewers in Dortmund ended up lightening up their lagers. So kind of cool. It's a little bit of, drinking a little bit of beer history with Dortmunder Gold, where it's probably a little bit more true to what the coal miners and the steel mill workers would have been drinking back in the day. So what does a Dortmund lager taste like? I already alluded to it a little bit. These would be, again, the notes from the Beer Judge Certification Program guidelines. So overall, we have a pale, well-balanced, smooth lager beer, slightly stronger than the average beer, moderate amount of body, with a, for a lager, maybe sharp enough hop character, but overall mild aromatic hop character. So I mentioned the other big thing that drives this good balance between the malt and the hop character of a Dortmunder is water. The water in Dortmund is filled with all sorts of minerals. It's got tons of compound called sulfate. Sulfate is going to accentuate the hoppiness of the beer. It's got carbonate, which is related to pH. That's a totally different topic. It's got a lot of chlorides in it too, which is going to accentuate malt characters. So essentially this, combined with the clientele, the people who are living in Dortmund, also the water character of the city of Dortmund really helps bring out a richly, for a lager, richly both malty and hoppy beer that's got great balance to it. And then a typical Dortmunder will use lager yeast. The two main families of beers are ales and lagers. Lagers ferment a little bit cleaner, crisper, a little bit more easy drinking. And then the light Pilsner malt that's used in a lot of lagers from the European continent. Overall, some sensory vocab for you for a Dortmunder. When it comes to the malt character, both in the aroma and the flavor, generally speaking, we're looking at a kind of moderate grainy sweetness to it. That's, again, doesn't really dominate. It's going to be in balance with the hop character. Those hop characters are going to be different from what we're used to in the United States. So hops are very, terroir is very important for hops, just like it is for wine grapes and things like that. So hops that are coming from the European continent are going to be, they're going to smell floral, spicy, herbal. These are hops like from the Hallertau region in southern Germany, the Saz region in the Czech Republic. They smell and taste very different from the hops we get here in the US. So the Tropicostal I'm tasting, it's a very hoppy beer. This is a totally different kind of hop flavor. And just with the malt, the hops do not dominate over what's going on with the malt character. Making a little bit of a linger, both touch of sweetness with bitterness, but overall very balanced beer. And then lastly, other characteristics, again, mostly coming from yeast or something like that, clean fermentation, mouthfeel, good balance between the malts and hops throughout. If anything, you might notice a bit of a, I noticed this with our Dortmunder, it's got a little bit of a, you can almost tell that there's a lot of mineral content present in the water. There's something that tastes minerally about the beer itself. in a pleasant way. Kind of light to deep golden color with medium body, you know, kind of, again, balance is the name of the game for a Dortmunder lager. By the way, if you're curious, the German Helles or export beer, that's the technical name for this style, is like the beer judge certification program guideline, we call it. It basically just means Helles means it's light and export means it's, this style happened to be frequently exported to other countries in addition to being consumed in Dortmund frequently. So you'll see it called a Helles export beer sometimes, but it's a Dortmunder lager. And lastly, for a beer style, important stuff, the vital statistics, things like the alcohol content ranges from 4.8 to 6 or so. IBUs range from 20 to 30. Good info to know for when you're kind of studying a beer style, to know, is this a true to style beer? And we think our Dortmunder is. It's a little bit on the high end for ABV for Dortmunder, definitely on the high end of IBU as well. No surprise, as American craft beers tend to be, whenever an American craft brewer does a version of a European beer here, it's always a little bit extra compared to how they're brewed in Europe. So it's always a little bit higher in ABV. It's always a little bit hoppier than it is across the pond. So it's no surprise that we see that in our Dortmunder. I'm curious if you guys want to throw out what you're tasting in all these beers. I'm always curious about that. So don't be shy. Toss some stuff in the chat. What kind of malt flavors are you tasting? You get a hoppy character? Is it easy drinking, smooth, clean, all that kind of stuff? Don't be shy. Feel free to share some stuff in the chat. I know John has had plenty of Dortmunder. He could probably tell me what it tastes like without even tasting it right now.
Yeah, it's one of the more easy drinking beers you're gonna come across. And I wish I had one now to like to record some of my my more immediate thoughts. But it's, you know, it's a great warm weather beer. It's a great, but it's got a lot of, you know, it's got a lot of heft to it. I mean, it's not like some lighter beers you'll drink just don't have quite the sort of like, it's a little breadier than a beer that's this light, I find. Than,
Totally, yeah.
Some of the other ones.
I think that bready malt character is the hallmark for Dortmunder. I love, you know, we had the pleasure of drinking. We had to taste the beer right off the fermenters on Fridays before the beer gets packaged the next week. When you got tank fresh Dortmunder and you're tasting it, you can really, it feels like you're walking into a bakery sometimes because you're getting that poof, that big whiff of super fresh malt aroma. We have some great comments. Yeah, Dortmunder, easy drinking, refreshing, crisp, excellent. There's a question, is there a difference in the taste between can and bottle? Are some beers better in one or the other? No, pretty much. That's something that I have heard there used to be an issue with the lining of the can. It's a little bit before my time. By the time I started enjoying fine craft beers about a decade ago, companies had rectified whatever problem there was where like that aluminum flavor would kind of seep into the beer, I think. That's been rectified. So you're gonna, the liquid that goes into a bottle or a can it's gonna taste pretty much exactly identical. It's really just a matter of consumer preference at this point. Some people just like drinking from bottles. They like the feel of the glass, whatever. It's got a classic look, maybe something like that. Some people, I prefer cans. Cans have a lot of advantages in being lighter, easier to stack. You know, when it comes to the business sense, less shipping cost. When it comes to my fridge at home, I can fit more cans in the fridge than bottles. That's important. Overlooked fact. They're more recyclable, all that stuff. When it comes to beer quality, officially one way or the other, one's not necessarily better, but cans have a better seal. So they're gonna stay fresher a little longer. They're opaque. So no light is gonna get through. And that's when the beer's skunky, that's because UV light hit it and reacted with the hop compounds. That what creates the skunk flavor. So personally, I prefer cans, but they are both good. They're both gonna be just fine. And Matt, I kind of just answered Matt's question as he was asking. Officially, we have the same shelf life for our bottles and cans. The difference is going to be subtle, but I think there's a slight edge to freshness when it comes to the can. But don't not buy bottles because of that, certainly.
This is too why, like, the light damage thing is why bottles are brown, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Corona, skunky all the time. Heineken, skunky all the time, right? They're in green and clear glass. Those don't offer the same UV protection. Brown bottles keep out almost all of it. You'd have to be like holding a brown bottle like right up to a light, or like leave it in a sunny windowsill. It still can get skunked, but it's a lot harder for the brown glass to get skunked. That's why almost all craft beers are going to see in brown bottles. So Dortmunder for us, it is totally classic, right? It's one of our first 2 beers along with Elliott Ness. It's been around for 33 years, since we're 33 years old. And it's got a great story behind it, just like a lot of our other classic beers do. So a note about that story. This beer was originally called, drumroll, it's right there in front of you on the screen, the Heisman. So named after John Heisman of college football fame. I got my little pose in my little box here on Zoom. So John Heisman was born right around the corner from us in Ohio City, not far from the brewery. So when Pat and Dan Conway opened up Great Lakes, they wanted to bring a lot of good attention to the neighborhood, which is a little bit of a rough spot. Named their original lager the Heisman. And then they won a gold medal at the Benchmark Beer Festival in this country, which is the Great American Beer Festival. It happens in Denver every single year. They didn't do the festival this year, last year, but they still did the judging for the medals. And then we got a little famous, and we got a cease and desist letter from the people who run the Heisman Trophy, a little love note from them. And so rather than try to fight it, pay some lawyers and stuff like that, we said, we're a young company, we're growing fast, we don't have time to worry about this. We'll just call the beer for the style that it is. It's a Dortmunder style beer, and then pay tribute to the high quality of that beer, high quality beer across the board, by calling out that original gold medal, which is still on the packaging for us today. So when you think Great Lakes, you tend to think of two beers. But let's say for 10 months of the year, you tend to think Dortmunder Gold, right? But we have a lot of other exciting new beers, and I'm going to talk about the 1-2 punch of them for the middle portion here. Yes, that's kind of like the new stuff and some of the new directions that we're going, while still retaining all the classic beers. We haven't cut any of our old beers. Still got Dortmunder, Burning River, Edmund Fitzgerald, the list goes on. We have a lot of exciting new beers too for the newer consumer tastes that are getting out there. One of those is Crushworthy, the Lo-Cal Citrus Wheat. So not a traditional beer style. It is totally something that just, it's a product that was made because people like refreshing wheat beers. They like a nice sessionable, low ABV, 4% product where you can knock back a number of them while hiking or playing volleyball or going on a picnic or whatever, and still have a clear head. It's got fruit flavors. Those are extremely popular in beer right now. So we use natural orange and lemon puree, and then also the peels of both of those fruits when we're brewing this beer to get a real fresh citrus fruit character to this beer. The better for you movement is alive and well in alcohol products, just like it is in other categories as well. So low calorie beers, which is generally a beer that's around 100 calories. So in addition to tasting really good and also being a sessionable beer, it also is better for you. It's low calorie. So if we're going to let it roll for a couple more weeks here, right? It's mid-December, it's the holiday time and stuff like that. But I have a feeling you're going to see a little spike in Crushworthy sales come early January, because people are going to be looking at cutting back on, lose that weight again. You don't want to give up beer totally. A low calorie beer is a great way to go. So there's a lot of different fun stuff going on in Crushworthy. And it's a beer for so many different people for so many different occasions. You know, you might just drink this beer because you love the citrus character. You might be intentional about how many calories you're putting in your body. You might just enjoy that it's a really refreshing, easy drinking beer. This beer is for all of those people. And it's got that awesome juicy citrus heart on the front. It's really bursting, reflects that citrusy, juicy fruit character that the beer presents. Super colorful with the gold and the green. It's a little bit of that brighter packaging that's been coming out for us. Not that the new Dortmunder label isn't also quite flashy, but it's a little bit more of the classic black and gold, right? Whereas some of the newer beers like Crushworthy have a little bit more pop visually. It's only been out since March. It feels like it's been out forever. But time is a weird thing during COVID. So I don't want to dwell too much, guys, on the history stuff for these again, because we only have so much time. But basically, in essence, wheat beers have been around this country for a number of years, a couple centuries, kind of brought over by German immigrants. If you enjoy a good Weihenstephaner, Hefeweizen, or something like that, that's the old school German wheat beer. And then saw a little bit of a dip because of the world wars and all that, but ironically saw a little bit of a comeback after the Second World War, because people who were stationed in Europe had these delightful wheat beers in southern Germany and wanted to experience those back in the States. So wheat beers kind of come back, but really the contemporary wheat beer style came about in the 1980s in where John is from, in the Pacific Northwest, especially Portland, right? Widmer is one of the classic Portland breweries. So they release a beer that they style as a Hefeweizen. Tastes a little bit different from the traditional German version. If you like the traditional German version, you probably like that banana and clove flavor. That's totally coming from yeast. Yeast actually produces that flavor byproduct. But the American versions don't have that. American ale yeasts don't produce those same banana clove flavors. But we still have the refreshing character that comes from wheat malt. That's what makes wheat beers so refreshing, is really that wheat malt. So this is the beer that really popularized wheat beers in the United States. Kind of spreads from there, and then wheat beers get really big time when Blue Moon comes out in the mid 1990s. You know, Low Level Secret, owned by Miller Coors and stuff like that. Whatever, doesn't matter for history perspective. That's what popularized wheat beers on a national scale, was good old Blue Moon. And we're happy for that, because wheat beers are a lovely style that we love to brew. Some other great examples out there, just a shout to our friendly competitors, Bell's Oberon. You know, people are, I'm sure, familiar with that here in the Midwest. Allagash White is a wonderful Belgian wheat beer. So there's a pretty strong tradition of brewing wheat beers in the US of A. I saw there was a little chat. Let me check on that. Oh, love the citrus flavors. Thank you, Amy. Yeah.
But a lot of times with wheat beers, you'll see them a little cloudy. Like, what's the reason for that?
Great question. Yeah. So, and that's a great segue too, and sensory and all that. So like a lot of traditional beers, like lagers especially, right? Lagers are conditioned for a long period of time. That really helps them clarify. All the particulate, it's not really related to flavor, kind of settles out during the storage process. But wheat beers are generally almost pretty much always served really young, and then they have that wheat malt produces it has a lot of protein in it, and that protein is what's these beers are also packaged and served unfiltered, and so protein's not filtered out, and there's so much of it in there. That's actually what causes the haze, is proteins that are in suspension within the liquid. So basically, it's the fact that the beer is unfiltered to retain a little bit more of a fresh flavor. It still has the yeast in it too. The yeast still has a touch of cloudiness, but it's really about the large amount of wheat that's being used in the brew. That's why hazy IPAs, we're not going to talk about hazies today, but almost all hazy IPAs will use wheat in the for their grain bill because it creates that same kind of haze that you get in a wheat beer. So I pulled from the commercial brewers guidelines for wheat beers, just because they have a fruit wheat beer category. And these are very broad strokes for the commercial versions. In essence, it's a pretty light beer overall, kind of low body, tends to be maybe straw to light amber in color, maybe sometimes influenced by the fruit that's added. So like if it's a raspberry wheat beer, it might be red, something like that. They might be hazy and cloudy because they're served with yeast and they're unfiltered. They can also be clear and be filtered. That's totally fine too. Did I have Gumball Head up there? I thought I did. Never mind. Floyd's Gumball Head is a wheat beer that's totally filtered. And it's generally speaking, overall flavor impact, it's pretty light across the board. These are light, refreshing beers, right? That's what they're designed to be. And then they'll probably have a little bit of mention for the German style wheat beer. Fermentation characteristics, the flavors coming from yeast are super important. They are less important in the American version because they're using American ale yeast strains, which those just don't produce as many of those fruity esters that the German versions do. But most importantly, it's the wheat beer. But the key thing driving a fruit wheat beer is, of course, the fruit that's being added. So we see so many different cool expressions of that. For Crushworthy, it's a kiss of orange and lemon. For other cool ones, my goodness, there are some other good fruit wheat beers out there. My wife loves 21st Amendment's Heller High Watermelon. It's a fruit beer with some watermelon in it. You know, the wheat beer is really important for that refreshing character, but people are seeking these out a lot of time because they have the fruit added as well. So that's pretty much what we're going for Crushworthy. I'm curious, you know, if anyone else had any other thoughts on Crushworthy, what it tastes like, how they're digging it, please feel free. And of course, as always, any questions that you all out there have, we have a solid crowd here tonight. If you have any other questions about anything, throw them in that chat and we'll get them answered. Hope you guys are all enjoying so far. Okay, we're looking pretty good on time, 10, 15 minutes. We got a 1-2 punch of beers to close us out. So we got our classic lager. We had our refreshing wheat beer. Couldn't do a tasting like this if we didn't talk about IPAs, right? So our latest and greatest when it comes to hop forward beers is Tropicostal Tropical IPA. And that is the delicious beverage that I've been sipping on here in our little excursion today. So Tropicostal clocking in at 6% ABV. We see the big jump in IBUs that I alluded to before. We've gone from 30 or so for Dortmunder. I didn't even talk about the IBUs for Crushworthy because they pretty much don't matter. We're now in firmly in hop forward territory with IBUs of 60. So you're going to get some bitterness on this beer. Nothing overwhelming, but it's present. It's definitely there. I find it personally adds a refreshing element to the beer, where there's nothing overly sweet about it because there's that bitterness to balance things out. Now, malts for this beer, malt, you need it for fermentation, right? For sugar and stuff like that. And you can't have a beer that's literally just all hop because it wouldn't be balanced. So there's a touch of caramel 10 present in Tropicoastal. And remember, Dortmunder was caramel 60. So basically, the higher the number for that caramel malt, the more intense the flavor is going to be. 10, that means we have just a little touch of caramel malt sweetness in there. And what that really does, it provides a great base for a wide range of tropical fruit flavors and aromas that are all coming from the hops. No fruit added to this beer in any way. Mentioned earlier when it comes to, I believe I did, or more explicitly, but when it comes to hops, the source of the flavors and aromas that we get in hops are called essential oils. Many different kinds of essential oils you can find in a hop. And the essential oils in these American hops that we use really drive the passion fruit, mango. I got a ton of pineapple in Tropicoastal. That's the big tropical fruit that I get in this beer. It's all coming from essential oils, coming from hops like Idaho 7, Calypso, Strata. These are all 3 new hops for us here at Great Lakes. We haven't used them before. You'll see Mosaic and Lemon Drop in some of our other beers. It's almost kind of like salt and pepper. So the whole goal with Tropicoastal is like to really deliver this like tropical fruit forward experience in beer form. Bring it to that beach that sun is setting in front of. So obviously IPAs are huge in the US. So just a couple notes on the background of IPAs. They actually started off quite a while ago. Pierre Ballantyne, I don't know if everyone remembers good old Ballantyne IPA, but it goes back to a Scotsman who brought this very English style to American soil back in the 1800s. And his brand kind of lasted in the American beer industry just long enough that some of the early American craft brewers tasted that beer, and it was one of the very few IPAs that were around. So guys like Burt Grant from Yakima Brewing, Fritz Maytag from the Anchor Brewery in San Francisco, but most especially the granddaddy of American craft beer, Ken Grossman from Sierra Nevada, brewed this more hop-forward style beer called IPA. Here in the United States, using American ingredients like the Cascade hop, which is native to the US. Tastes very grapefruity and piney. Higher ABV, elevated IBU content, especially compared to a lot of the other beers that were present at the time. And really what I kind of see as the first kind of the prototypical American IPA is a beer that's out right now. It's a seasonal beer, it's out right now. It's very good. It's called Celebration IPA. Many brewers, if you ask them what their favorite holiday beer is, they will say Celebration IPA. It's a red IPA. It's got some malt character, but it's got super fresh, piney characteristics to it. And we all brew the spicy beers all the time. So we frequently like to enjoy this nice red IPA during the holidays. And then, of course, IPAs pretty much blow up on all parts of the country. Breweries like Harpoon from Boston start brewing IPAs. So IPA moves from the West Coast to the East Coast. And a lot of these releases are kind of seasonal at first. But then they started becoming more year-round offerings in the late 90s and early 2000s as American beer drinkers continue to push their palates. So, and then Stone IPA is one of the quintessential original year-round IPAs that comes out. And then brewers just keep on experimenting into the 2000s with big versions of IPAs, dark malt versions, Belgian yeast, add fruit, all sorts of stuff until we get to the more contemporary popular versions like the Hazy IPA and our little Tropical IPA. I'm going to bounce right over. I had some notes on Tropical IPA, but essentially what's important to know is that there was a big shift in how American hop farmers were growing their hops around 2010, where they stopped focusing so much on bitterness and focused more on flavor and aroma. And a lot of the old school hops tasted piney and resinous and stuff like that, and the hops shifted to tasting more tropical fruit forward. So that's how you end up getting a tropical fruit forward IPA like we have today.
Yeah, this is really a different take on an IPA as far as it's got, I think, a much more sort of like not quite delicate flavor, but a much like more balanced flavor than a lot of IPAs that you're gonna, I was over at someone's house the other day and I had a couple of the Sierra Nevada Torpedoes, it's a good beer, but if you have more than 2, you feel like you've been munching on pine cones all night.
Right, yeah. So Torpedo is a great example of the old school piney resinous type thing. Whereas this one's a lot, the other big thing too is the old school IPAs have a lot more malt character to them, a lot more sweetness and so on. Whereas this one's super light body, much easier for sitting underneath the palm tree and sipping. When it comes to IPA, it's all about the hops, right? I mean, maybe a little bit of a grainy thing in the background when it comes to malt, a tiny bit of a caramel or toast, but it's really all about, yes, there's some bitterness that's going to be present. In a good version, it's going to be balanced out with what's going on in the rest of the beer. But the highlight is the flavor and aroma, citrus, floral, pine, resin, and so on. naturally for our particular take that we're looking at, that you all are hopefully tasting tonight, it is tropical fruit flavor and aroma. Stuff like, again, I think a pineapple is the big one. So that's our Tropicoastal. You know, I don't think I need to say too much more about IPAs and the modern context, with, you know, what they kind of taste like and stuff like that. They're everywhere. I think we're all kind of drinking them all the time. So, and I definitely want to give some love to Christmas Ale here. I think we started like 5 after or so. So we got a little bit of time. I want to make sure we hit the big Christmas Ale stuff. But just know we have other IPAs too. We have, in addition to Tropicoastal, the hazy that came out last year, Hazecraft, kind of the more West Coast style IPA, and Great Lakes IPA came out in 2019. So as you can see, we're getting really big into the IPA game over the past couple of years. And of course, the classic Commodore Perry English IPA, which we've been brewing since 1992. And we have a fun Imperial IPA series where we're ratcheting up the ABV, ratcheting up the hop flavor, so it's even more intense hop expression than some of our other IPAs. Current offering for that, so it's a new offering every 2 months. Right now we have the Sticky Swamp Monster of Dank Demon that's out. And we'll have a new fun one next year too. We'll be announcing the lineup soon. Pliny, yes, Cheryl gives a shout out to Pliny the Elder. It's a lovely double IPA that I've been privileged to have a couple times in my life. And some Chill Wave love too.
Yeah, Chill Wave is dynamite.
That'll be out before you know it. It's a wintertime beer, so can't wait. And of course, we get to taste everything like a month and a half before you guys do. So we may already be brewing another fan favorite Imperial IPA right now. But I can't say anything until we announce the lineup. Okay, here's the big one for everybody to close us out in style. Good old Christmas Ale. And I think I kind of want to cut to the chase here for when it comes to Christmas Ale. We can dig in. There's always some questions on Christmas Ale. I'm ready for them. Throw them in the chat now. We can get right into those if everybody wants to. But just a couple notes from me before we, as we wrap up our program here tonight, as we approach 7:30. We close it out with the big guy. So Christmas Ale, 7.5% alcohol by volume, 30 IBU. Note that's the same IBU as Dortmunder. I don't think you're tasting a lot of bitterness in this beer. So you can see we have a whole host of different malts that we use in Christmas Ale. Wheat malt that helps with head retention. There are those. Crystal is another name for a caramel malt. Adds that distinct sweetness to the beer. This thing called Special Roast adds the beautiful Christmas-like red hue. Roasted barley adds a little bit of a drying character. Really, all this grain is there to support the big three. 20 pounds each of cinnamon and ginger per batch. 150 kegs per batch, that's a lot. And then 612 pounds of honey per batch of Christmas Ale. It's really all that malt character is there to support that bouquet of spices and the honey that really channels the feel of the holiday season. Again, I don't want to go way over time here, guys, so we're going to kind of just jump through the history here. Basically know that holiday beers are a universal tradition. They're very much a universal human tradition from any culture, any background. We brew bigger, darker, stronger, more flavorful beers for the holidays around the solstice at the beginning of winter, whether it's related to the Christian tradition or other traditions or whatnot. Specifically for us, we're very influenced by the English tradition, which had a lot of fun warmed up beer drinks that were spiced, kind of like beer cocktails, that we essentially then moved forward into the modern day, and we actually brew with those spices today, as opposed to warming up these darker, stronger beers and adding the spices after the fact. When it comes to the American craft beer tradition, mentioned Anchor with IPA. Anchor also did one of the early versions of a Christmas ale. They're very influential for getting a lot of modern craft beer moving. That came out in the mid 70s. And ironically for us, this is a question that always comes up, and I'll kind of allude to the answer right now, but if someone wants to ask it, they can. Ironically for us at Great Lakes, Anchor actually does change their beer recipe every year. And they also change the evergreen tree that's on the label for the beer every year. So that's a fun one for people to come back to year and notice the slight differences in the flavor year by year. But really, when it comes to what a lot of people in this country think of as a Christmas beer or a holiday season beer, which is kind of like a strong amber ale with spices, we can really lay claim at Great Lakes to being the progenitor of the style. So it came out in 92, our Christmas ale, and quickly gained a lot of notoriety out of our pub, and then in limited bottle production, and then kegs to local retailers and stuff like that. And all of a sudden it's this massive cult phenomenon in the 2000s and beyond. And it became so popular. First of all, it's one of our top sellers, if not our top seller for the year, when it's only sold for 2 months. But even beyond us, it became so popular that everybody else in Cleveland now brews a strong amber ale with spices around the holidays, right? We love all those guys, you know, Mark Garden across the street, Fatheads, Tall Dogs, and all that, all brew what almost is kind of called a separate beer style at this point, the Northeast Ohio style Christmas ale. We've had emails sent to us from brewers in San Diego, California, Minnesota, all across the United States, where like, hey, you know, I grew up in Cleveland, and I'm a brewer. I own my own little tap room right now, and we have a Northeast Ohio style Christmas ale on tap, and we're just like so geeked out about that, right? Like, to have a place in San Diego that's brewing a Northeast Ohio style Christmas ale, it's like, man, I guess we really hit the big time. So it's a lot of fun. There's a reason why this beer is so important for us as a brewery, why people love it so much. Obviously, it's had enough resonance where it's almost like an official beer style. So really, really cool to see. I saw there was something in the chat. Oh, yep. Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. I'm going to skip past this. Basically, you know, again, the main point of these beers is the fact that they are, so I've mentioned once or twice already, stronger, darker beers that have spices added. And of course, those spices are going to be spices that are kind of alluding to the holiday season. So often stuff like cinnamon, ginger, stuff you'd find in baked goods or certain kinds of holiday cooking. So, okay, I saw one of the great questions. Cheryl asked, sugar rim or no for Christmas ale? I'm cool either way. If you like drinking Christmas ale with the sugar cinnamon rim, go for it. If I am served it that way, if I go somewhere, I'm totally going to drink it. I'm not going to turn my nose up and say poo-poo or anything like that. We don't do it that way here at the brew pub simply because we pour so much Christmas ale that if we did the cinnamon sugar rim, I think everyone would go totally insane here. And we would be keeping whatever our spice supplier is in business big time. So it's great either way. If you like that extra kick of cinnamon and those spices, go for it. We just don't do that here at the pub. But yeah, if however people like to drink the beer, that's totally cool. Any other questions? There's usually a ton of Christmas ale questions. Where are all the Christmas ale questions? I don't want to keep you guys. We're at 60 minutes for sure at this point, so I don't want to linger past. But any other questions about Christmas ale or anything else before we kind of start wrapping up? Do we have a satisfied group here? Kind of like it. Well, just other fun facts so you guys know. We're doing 20 pounds each of cinnamon and ginger per batch, and we do 320 or so batches of Christmas ale per year, which is totally crazy. We're using well over 6,000 pounds each of cinnamon and ginger. By the way, that cinnamon and ginger, those are whole cinnamon sticks and fresh cut ginger. So, you know, no dried out, frozen, whatever ingredients. We're using the fresh stuff. We're using raw honey. Each of those 55-gallon drums comes from an awesome small family bee farm in southern Michigan. So we're getting to almost 200,000 pounds worth of honey. We actually may have broken 200,000. I think we did some extra batches from when we first compiled the numbers. So probably over 200,000 pounds of honey used for Christmas sale this year. For the infamous first pour party, which is when we tap Christmas sale down here at the brew pub for the first time, we poured in 2019, the last normal first pour party. We poured over 8,000 pints of Christmas ale, which is one Christmas ale every 5 seconds for 12 hours. Wow. And yeah, it ends up being our best seller, despite only being available for about 2 months, and often ends up being our best selling beer. That's how much people love this beer. Recipe doesn't change. ABV has always been the same. All the questions that people didn't ask, which is totally fine. I figured just throw them out there anyways. Cool. Oh, one more note, and then I'm done. The seasonal line, super big for us at Great Lakes, right? Christmas sale is obviously huge, but we have the dynamic duo as well of Conways and Oktoberfest, our traditional seasonals. And if y'all haven't tried the new summer seasonals, spring and summer seasonals that we came out with in cans for the first time last year, look out for them coming up in the warmer weather. Very refreshing wheat beer with lemon, and then the Mexican lager brewed with lime. All right, that's all. I want to be respectful of time and everything, right? So that's all I've got. John, do you have any closing comments, or were there any other questions before we kind of wrap up here?
Well, from my perspective, we definitely got to have you back again, because I need to have a program like this done with someone else running it.
That's right.
Where I'm at my apartment enjoying along with the rest. But yeah, this has really been an absolutely fascinating program. The information about Dortmunder Gold, like I'm not like a beer snob or whatever, but I worked in the industry a little bit along, you know, after I graduated from college, and I didn't know any of that stuff. So I really appreciate all the sort of, in addition to the great beer, like the really interesting sort of factual content that you provided us with. That really powered up the whole thing, I think.
Awesome. I'm a big nerd. I love sharing.
Well, thanks so much to everybody for coming out to this. This was a little bit of an experimental program, but it's something we want to do more of. I think that it's a way of like people learning about something. You know, you just think people think beer and they think, you know, just get it, drink it. But this is a really cool way of learning more about like the beer that you're drinking, how to drink it, what to look for, and I want to really thank Mike for coming out and doing this. This is not coming out, but I mean, being on Zoom and doing this. This is just an absolutely fascinating evening, and thanks again to everybody for coming out from this.
Sure thing. Thanks, everybody. Stay warm. Beer will help.